Welcome to Students Incorporated. I'm your host, Mr. Jason. Join me weekly as my team and I produce content that's informative, positive, fun, and uplifting. This podcast is created and produced with the help of students from the International Community School of Bangkok. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today's episode in segment 1 is all about turning big ideas into real impact. We're diving into the Capstone project experience with special guests who've lived it from challenges to breakthroughs. And later, get ready for part 9 of Legends of the Yucatán. Our story is reaching a whole new level you won't want to miss. But first, let's hear our quote of the day and get some headline news.
Our quote of the day comes from the one and only Capstone man, Mr. Mike Holden. He said, "The most important part about Capstone is students learning about others and themselves." This quote shows that the most significant part of a capstone isn't just finishing a project. It's also about growth. Learning about others means working with different kinds of people, understanding new perspectives, and building real teamwork skills. At the same time, learning about themselves helps students figure out what they're good at, where they struggle, and even what they're passionate about. In the end, the capstone is less about the final product and more about becoming a better, more self-aware person. And that's the quote of the day. Now on to some headline news.
Thank you for our quote of the day. Celebrating our episode on Capstone, here are 3 Capstone-like projects across the world. First off, in March 2025, the World Bank launched a new project in Djibouti, Africa, to strengthen communities and support vulnerable groups. The initiative focuses on providing grants and low to zero interest loans for projects that boost economic growth and reduce poverty. This approach aims to empower local communities by enhancing their capacity to manage development projects and improve living conditions. Next up, in India's Dang district, local communities have initiated various small-scale development projects to alleviate poverty. These efforts include carpentry training workshops, village grain bank schemes, and hostels for young school children. These projects aim to provide sustainable livelihoods and improve education for impoverished families in the region. Finally, in Senegal, also in Africa, community members in Dakar have undertaken small-scale projects to combat poverty. During the rainy season, they work together to prevent flooding in their area, and in the dry season, they produce soaps to generate income. These initiatives not only provide economic benefits, but also strengthen social cohesion within the community. And that ends our news for this episode.
Thank you for the quote and the headline news. What's a capstone project? Maybe you've never had to do one yet. Well, in this first segment, we'll be talking with Mr. Mike, who leads the Capstone Project Initiative here at ICS. And we'll also be talking with several students about their experience in doing their capstone projects. To go back to my question, what is a capstone project? In a nutshell, a capstone project is a big final assignment you usually do in your last year of high school, college, or at the end of a specific learning program. Okay, to get us started, I want to welcome Mr. Mike to the show. Hello and welcome back. Glad you can join us again to talk about this very important project. So to begin, could you please introduce yourself and give us a brief explanation of this thing called the Capstone Project and its intended purpose?
Glad to be here. Always enjoy the podcast. So my name is Mike Holden, and I'm the Service Learning Coordinator here at ICS. I've been at ICS since 2014, and I also lived in Malaysia and Indonesia. So the Capstone Service Project, what is this? Well, so this is a student community service project where students identify a real social problem, they implement an authentic solution, and then they present their project. And so you also asked kind of about intended purpose. So I think that's kind of about the whys. And so there are actually a lot of whys. And we explored these actually in our first workshop together. But a couple of the key whys, I think, from maybe a school perspective, is that ICS really values making a difference. It's kind of core of being a responsible citizen and a follower of Christ. And so it's connected very closely with the mission of ICS. And then historically, even before I came to ICS, the school board wanted a clear way for us to have students demonstrate those expected school-wide learning results. So that's a pretty core element of the project. I think there's also a lot of like learning and stretching that students do, and it is a bold experience, and students are going to learn and grow and be stretched as they go through the process and the struggles and the highs and lows of that. And I think another good why for students is it really does help you to stand out with universities or even future jobs.
Yeah, Capstone, can't say it's my favorite thing to do, but it's definitely useful. It creates so many essential skills that will stay with you in life. Like, for example, building discipline, creating leadership skills, and connecting, networking, public speaking, and learning how to gather information and see what the majority wants. Now, from the perspective of the Capstone Project Coordinator, what are some of the biggest challenges for coordinating such a big and long-term project for around 100 students? Alternatively, from the perspective for students, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges for students?
Yeah, nice, Frank. Yeah, I think you've captured some of those like great underlining lessons that students get. Well, you talked about 100 students, and really it's actually more like 200 students because I've got about 100 juniors and 100 seniors all going through the phases of the project. So yeah, I think one of the challenges that I face is just trying to keep 200 people on pace with all the different things they have going on in their lives. So it means I get to encourage students and motivate them, and everybody requires, a little different nudges. And honestly, Frank, I really hate being the bad guy. So that's definitely one of the challenges that I have. Also, not having like a dedicated like time to meet with students every week or every other day like you have for class. I think that's difficult. Like when I was teaching before, a student was missing an assignment or needed more help, and I'd see him every other day or so. So I think kind of not having that consistent face-to-face time, is a little bit challenging. A fun challenge that I get is that, because every project is a little bit different and unique, so I get to try to think through those projects and try to support students individually with their community and kind of their specific projects in mind. I think for students, Capstone is, it's a big project. And so it's just another element that they are working through in an already like packed schedule. So it might be exam time or AP time. And then this is also something that's on their plate, which is tricky, right? So it's tricky to balance those classes, extracurriculars, ROTC for some, family stuff, other things going on. It can just be a lot, right? And so this is a big thing that's already going on in a packed schedule. I think another challenge for students is starting. So that can be pretty tough, right? So it pushes you out of your comfort zone right at the beginning. And so if you haven't had a lot of personal community service experiences and developed relationships with an organization or different people, and that can be pretty tough, and it requires you to kind of do that cold call process. And so it's like, hi, I'm a student, and I'm interested in serving here. And I feel like that can be really intimidating for a lot of students, right? And it's challenging. So I think, it's a big project. And so for many students, they've never undertaken anything this big before. And so there's a lot of learning and growing that takes place. And some students have more support to help them than others, which is also another challenge.
Yeah, thank you for that. I would say that trying to help each student through the process, even when the students are not always in the same place in the process, would be a huge challenge. So you have some students who are starting early and are like ahead of the game, and other students who kind of wait till the last minute. I would see that as a huge challenge as far as someone who's trying to help them along the way. The other thing I think, which is kind of cool to point out, and I think you alluded to this, was the idea that the students are learning things, and even some things they're learning, they're not even know that they're learning them along the process, like the soft skills needed, the like approaching a stranger, talking to them about a potential problem or issue they'd like to like be involved with, and just some of those soft skill things that we tend to learn going through that process, I think are super helpful. Moving on, let's see. If you were to give advice for students who are starting or in the process of completing their capstone project, what would your advice be? This is our last question, and we always like to ask for advice from our guests. So what would that advice be for those students who are just starting or also in the process of completing their capstone?
Good question. All right, so some advice. I would say number one, timing. So start and stay on track and kind of knock it out quickly. I think for a lot of students, it feels like it takes a long time, or when it takes a long time, that it really feels like it drags and it feels more burdensome. So ride that momentum, get started, and get going on it, and try to keep up with your timing and your schedule. I think another thing would be like flexibility. So just being patient with yourself and recognize that it's very likely that things will not happen exactly the way you think it's going to. So be ready to pivot and be flexible in that. Kind of along with that would be maybe your attitude. So there are going to be some highs and there are going to be some lows. There's days when you're going to be excited and I don't know, things like your fundraising is all coming in and you're like super excited about that. And then there's other days that are going to just be like difficult and challenging. You just don't want to work on it. You got it. And so like making the choice to stay positive can really help you in that process. Maybe another one would be, and kind of related to that, is focus on the people that you're serving rather than yourself. I know this is really difficult, but I also know for me personally, this helps me. So I know when I'm like really not wanting to do some task or I'm kind of feeling grumpy about something, then I'm often focused on myself. And if I can make the choice to think about the people that I want to help, then that helps me to have a better attitude and gives me kind of the energy to take the next step and to make some progress on it. And maybe one last key essential piece of advice, I would say listen to this podcast, because there's so many great episodes you can learn about all kinds of ways to do a great project.
Amen.
I mean, recently, Mr. Tim's episode were super amazing, or you had the episode about ideas to execution. That was like jammed packed full of amazing advice for Capstone. So listen to the podcast, guys.
All right. Yes. Thank you for that plug for the podcast. And just like Mr. Mike was saying, as we kind of end this segment with Mr. Mike, the idea that these skills that you learn going through the Capstone Project brings the student into real world examples, real world circumstances where they have to do things to adapt, to be flexible. They're meeting with people that they have to kind of like work around. And so it really gets them out of the classroom, puts them in to the real world, and it allows them to learn in ways that they just wouldn't otherwise. So it's such a helpful project, and I know students are scared to do it and are very nervous, and it stresses them out a lot. But the skills that they learn, you will use those in university, you'll use those in life, your first career, your job. You can use them in your own neighborhoods when you're talking with your neighbors. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mike, for sharing about the importance of this project. It's good that students are introduced to this type of project in high school, as it can really set the foundation of how to approach solving real world problems and working with people in a very practical way. All right. We welcome several students to the studio who will share some of their own personal experience with this type of project-based learning activity. Next, Mia will help us and get us started.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. Could you please introduce yourself and let us know what you'll be doing after you graduate?
Well, hello. So my name is Micah Chernai, and I'll be going to St. Louis, Missouri in America, and I'm likely going to pursue a degree in literature.
Hi, my name is Esther, and I will be going to college to major in child development in California.
All right, so we are on the topic of capstone for this segment. So our next question for both of you is, what did you do for your capstone project, and was that something you were passionate about, or was it more of a strategic decision?
Basically, I designed a merchandise line for a nonprofit organization as a way to add another source of revenue. And I would say I had a mix of passion and strategy, just because it's a necessary thing for graduation. But it's still related to graphic design, and I really do enjoy art, so I still had that passion with the project.
For my capstone, I painted a mural at the Agape Youth Center to really ignite hope and strength within the children there. And since I enjoy doing art, I decided to use my artistic skills to bless the youth center. So I guess you could say that it was something I was really passionate about.
Yeah, it's really cool how you guys both like art and did incorporate art into your capstone projects. So since your capstones are, sort of making merchandise and painting, how long did your capstone projects take from start to finish?
I believe it took about like 24.5 hours. Don't quote me exactly on that, but it was about in that range-ish. And I say like a third of it was interacting directly with my community and just getting to know them and like, what do you guys like? What do you guys think of this too? Like having meetings and stuff. And the rest of it was just like the actual action of like designing work.
For my project, it took around 21 hours within a span of like 4 days.
That's a lot of time. So, since you guys, took like 20 plus hours for your capstone projects, what was the most time consuming part of the project for you?
Time consuming? I think I would say like, because what I had to do was like I had to design something that would be able to sell, that'd be appealing to people in general. And so what I did was I made my friends sit down and force them to look at all my work. It's like, what do you guys think? Like, do you guys like this? Like, is this appealing? Would you buy this? Please tell me, help. And I would just like go through the process over and over again. Like, hey, you're my new test subject now. And then I would just like experiment and see like, okay, I'll adjust this. I'll try that. I'll talk to this person and see if different demographics would be interested. Slightly different. Like, is this slightly more appealing? You got to tell me. So just doing it over and over again, that's a lot of time.
For me, both the essay part and the action part were equally time consuming, but I would say that since the action was more straightforward, it was easier to do.
All right, and what were some challenges that you faced while doing your capstone?
Because I worked with a nonprofit organization, but it's essentially just like a small business. But like being in that like an actual office setting is like, I can be in an academic setting, I can talk to teachers and staff and other students like pretty fine. I have no problems with that. But being in the office, like there's a weird, like it's different enough for like, this is strange. Being professional, like it's like, these are actual adults that do things and don't like care about students as much. Like I'm just kind of, hello, I'm a student, please talk to me. It's like, I had to learn to be much more like, okay, I'm in office, gotta act professional, like in a different, like more genuine real life experience. So that was like, I think I was able to, it's not super hard, but just that was a like initial like weird challenge I had to get over with. But yeah.
I would say not managing my time well enough, and honestly, it was just hard starting the project.
Yeah, I feel you, Esther. So now that you've completed your capstone, what would you say was the most rewarding part of it?
Just finishing. I think like both sides on like the being able to see all my work like as a whole, like after the whole span of it, and just like being able to be proud of what I did. Like, wow, I did that somehow, some way. It's like it's very, it's just nice to see you finishing like your own work and you made yourself. But also after the capstone speech, I was like, yes, and like it felt like chains had like got ripped off from me. Like I'm free, but yeah, it was just nice.
I would say, of course, completing capstone, it was very freedom inducing, but also honestly just being someone that can make a positive impacts for my community.
All right, and what advice would you give to students starting their capstone projects, especially the juniors?
Hey, juniors. I think like this advice gets repeated a lot already. I'll just be very brief about it. Just like start early for any underclassmen. If you can start as soon as possible, that would be. But like that's already been said so many times, and I think it's redundant. So I think more useful would just be like talk to the people here. A major benefit of ICS, I would say, is just the community that we have here, and just everyone is just so willing to help you out if you just ask. Just like ask and you shall receive. So please talk to teachers or staff or even other students and families. Like they are willing to help you, and they will like, I didn't know what I was doing at all in the start, and just like talking, like getting a better picture, it helps so much. Talk to people.
I would say to start early as well. How like everyone says, but also not to stress too much if you don't. Like I didn't really do a lot in the beginning, but it's not as hard as it seems, so just don't stress too much.
All All right, thank you guys so much for joining us and offering some advice to others as they take on this big last assignment of their high school career. Okay, so we have 2 more students in the studio to talk about their capstone project. So we welcome Joseph and Elsa. So hello guys and welcome to the podcast. First off, could you please introduce yourself and let us know what you'll be doing after you graduate?
Hi guys, I'm Elsa and I'll be studying biomedicine and technology in Taiwan.
Hi guys, I'm Joseph. I'll be studying finance in the States.
All right, really cool majors there. So now regarding your capstone project, what did you do for capstone and what was something that you were passionate about? Like, was it something more strategic or did you like actually, really like it and was just really passionate about it?
So I built an aquaponic farm to increase vegetable intake education. It was more of a strategic decision and my passion combined because I knew the project was going to take a long time. But in order to finish it, I also had to keep on going as like my interest in biotechnology that allowed me to persevere.
Thank you.
I been at RAMP because I used to do community service there and I want to make a lasting impact on the community that I used to serve on.
So what ramp was it? Like, what did you build it for? And like, what was it?
It was for disabled people and also
Wheelchairs?
Yeah, and also for people moving heavy objects.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. So how long did your capstone project take from start to finish?
On my paper, I said 58 hours, but the entire process from start to finish was in the span of 2 years.
What?
Yeah. It was a really big project.
2 years.
It was a really big project.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay, Joseph.
It was definitely a lot less than that. It was 15 hours and a half on paper.
Yeah, we should let you start first before else. Okay, so now that we're on the topic of time, what was the most time-consuming part of the project for you?
Honestly, the community service hours I put were not like completely accurate because I stayed overnight for like a couple of days in order to fully understand my community and the pain point. So I think the most time-consuming part was actually getting to know the people at my community.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll say it was the building process. It took around 10 hours to put the ramp and let it dry completely.
All right, that's a lot of hard things that you guys did in a very like small amount of time. So props to you guys. So, on top of that, what were some challenges that you faced while doing your capstone project?
Some challenges I faced were mostly language barrier because the workers there could not really understand each other. We had Chinese and Thai workers that didn't understand each other. And another challenge was that the aquaponic company took too long to respond back. And there was like a span of like 2 months where I had no idea what to do because they didn't reply. And another challenge I faced was that everyone had different opinions on the project. Some people thought it shouldn't be professionally built, and some people thought that it would be better to have it professionally built. So I took a long time presenting my reasons on why I thought it should be professionally built. Yeah.
For me, it was like weather issues that I faced because since like it's a construction project, if it's raining, it will be really hard to build the project, especially when I was about to start it. It was the rainy season, so I have to wait to around August, which capstone was almost due to like start the project and finish it.
Was it like concrete construction site?
Yeah, it was like a concrete.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, I see. So now that you guys are done with your capstones, what would you say was the most rewarding part of completing it?
I have multiple things that I feel like was really rewarding. One of the reasons was that the vegetables actually turned out really good. Originally, I was scared that the system wouldn't be completed by the time I finished my presentation, but it actually did. And another thing was that people are consistently helping with the system after seeing how successful it was. And I got notified the other day that the kids are eating more vegetables now, and their feedback about the taste was really positive, which is a really good thing.
Did you get to eat the veggies?
Yes.
Yes,
I did.
Was it good?
It was
crunchy.
so good. It was really crunchy.
Yeah.
I even had like a display on my presentation place.
Joseph?
I feel like it was just when I went back and I saw people using the ramp, and it felt really rewarding because it made those disabled people more like they had more access to the community.
Oh, that's really nice. So what advice would you guys, give to students starting their capstone projects like you guys were like a year ago?
I think the biggest thing I would advise kids to do is to actually finish your paper earlier. Because during that time, we have college apps, especially if you're applying to American universities.
Yeah.
Then you would have to balance the time to finish your paper and also submit these applications. So finish your paper first,
for sure.
and you'll have a lot of time to relax.
Yeah.
I feel like just not to stress about it. Like, it might seem really like intimidating at first, but like
For sure.
like I did 15 hours of work, and like I still somehow passed this project. So I feel like if you follow Mr. Mike's instruction and listen to his all of his like the after school sessions.
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, really?
And that's why I passed it, you know?
I was right behind you.
So like if I just listen to him, I think you're gonna pass the project. It's actually I don't think it's
For sure.
that hard of a project
Yeah.
to like pass.
Mm.
And
Yeah. For sure. All right. So thank you guys so much for joining us and offering some advice to the underclassmen as they take on, this big, really last assignment of their high school career. So yeah, thank you, Joseph and Elsa.
All right, you heard it here. The Capstone Project is not just a final assignment for the sake of creating busy work for students before they graduate. No, it's an important project that challenges the students in so many good ways: critical thinking, problem solving, executive functioning development, leadership, and last but not least, compassion towards something outside of themselves. Okay, that concludes our first segment. We'll be right back for our second segment right after this short PSA announcement.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, I have to do personal community service.
Hey, don't worry. It's going to be fun. And you can help people or our planet.
But I don't even know what to do.
Oh, there's so many cool places and things to explore. You can work with kids, elderly, animals, disabled, refugees and migrants, the environment, rural communities. There's so many. Just pick one and give it a try.
Okay. But where do I even find these places?
Well, I would say talk to your friends about what they've done. Maybe research some of the places near your home. Check with the posters outside of Mr. Mike's office, or even talk to him at lunch or break. Get a couple of your friends together and volunteer as a group. Remember, PCS is about serving and learning. Commit your all to who you're serving and learn about yourself and the world. Jump in and serve.
And we are back with our second segment, and we will continue with part 9 of our story, Legends of the Yucatán. Part 9 is titled The Safe House. If you missed parts 1 through 8, you can get caught up by listening to episodes 87 through 94. Legends of the Yucatán is a sequel to our Season 2 story, The Secrets of El Dorado, we released last year during episodes 55 through 64 in audio narration. It's also available in book form as a downloadable PDF from our website or in paperback version on Amazon.com. Just visit studentsincorporated.com to find out more. Okay, now moving on, Camden will give us a quick recap before we jump into part 9.
Recapping part 8, The Passengers. Carlos was caught with the jade jar, and Miranda hopes to return it to the original place. The bus accidentally picks up Maria and Renata on the way back to Merida. Hawthorne forms a plan to get them to tell where the golden mask is. And without further ado, let's jump back into our story, where we join our eclectic group of characters in their continuing adventure.
As the group returned to their hotel in Merida and got settled back into their different hotel rooms after a long day, Hawthorne waited down on the main floor for David, Miranda, and David's brother to return from their little side errand. He knew his idea was a long shot. The idea of David and Miranda getting the location of the golden mask from the 2 bus passengers before the police arrested them and hauled them off. He also knew that if David and Miranda did not get the location of the golden mask, they would miss their chance of recovering it and returning it to its rightful place once again. The rightful place being the secret and sacred Mayan treasure room inside El Castillo, where David had originally discovered it. Hawthorne didn't consider himself superstitious, but he did wonder if there was any merit to the idea that whoever held the golden mask would find bad luck, or be cursed in some way, until it was returned to the place it was found. There had just been a lot of unusual and weird things happening over the last half week, things that were related to the golden mask and the jade jar. Maybe the legends are true. The legends of the Yucatán, as Hawthorne remembered, were rooted in ancient Mayan culture and regional folklore, where sacred artifacts were believed to not just hold historical value, but spiritual power as well. According to the legends, artifacts that were gifts to powerful leaders or were crafted by the high priest were meant to remain in their ceremonial resting place to maintain harmony between the human world and the spiritual world. When these artifacts were stolen, the balance was broken. Misfortune and unrest followed every new possessor, as if the artifacts carried a curse for anyone who dared to claim that it was theirs. The legend serves as a warning passed down through generations that some treasures belong to the earth, and disturbing them invites consequences. It's a tale of reverence and consequence, and the unseen power of history that still echoes across the Yucatan Peninsula. Hawthorne had long ago rejected the notion and practice of finders keepers when it came to antiquities and artifacts. The practice of if you find it, you get to keep it was unethical and in some cases immoral. Yet this practice was still being employed by private treasure hunters, freelance archaeologists, and of course, grave robbers. Hawthorne despised the intentions of these groups. They were greedy and they lacked ethical and moral standards. This was just another example that power and money made people do dumb and stupid things, and usually at the expense of others. The 3 criminals who were picked up and arrested today found that out. And the cartel member who lost his life in the cenote for a few old coins found that out as well. As Hawthorne looks down at his watch, checking the time, David and Miranda enter the hotel's front doors and walk over to where Hawthorne is seated.
As David approaches Professor Hawthorne, he says, "Well, we have good news and bad news. What do you want to hear first?"
Hawthorne thinks for a moment and then replies, "I'd like to hear the bad news first since I can end my day with the good news."
Miranda adds, I like that logic. David, give him the bad news first, and then the good news.
David continues, "We have a potential location of where the golden mask is hiding, and according to my GPS, it's about 20 minutes from here."
Hawthorne then says, "Okay, what's the bad news then?"
"My brother disappeared while we were at the bus depot. He must have just slipped away into the crowd when we were busy talking with our 2 passengers, who, by the way, were promptly arrested a few minutes after they had purchased their bus tickets back to Mexico City." David continues, "We were able to get a potential location of where they hid the golden mask from the younger one. I think she was quite scared and surprised to get picked up by the police."
Miranda then adds, and I think we owe it to her to notify the people in Mexico City and tell them that she helped free your brother from the cartel. Maybe they'll go light on her criminal charges.
Hawthorne then says, "Well, with your brother not sticking around, that might be easier said than done. And chances are, if your brother was the driver, he also knows the location where the golden mask was hidden."
"So, timing is everything right now," David adds. "My brother is very resourceful and he could very well be planning to go get the golden mask for himself now. I'm going to book a taxi to take us to the location right now. I know it's late, but we need to try to recover that mask before anybody else does, even my brother."
Miranda says, I'm going with you.
"Me too," Hawthorne said. "You could use the help once we get there. Having 3 of us, we could split up and look for the thing. It'll probably be dark once we get there, so we'll need to keep that in mind as well." Hawthorne watches as David goes to the front desk clerk of the hotel and asks her to call a local taxi for hire for the 3 of them. He overhears David telling the clerk to inform the taxi driver they need to go to Hacienda Tebek off Route 180. About 10 minutes later, the taxi arrived at the hotel. Hawthorne, David, and Miranda got into the taxi, then confirmed with the driver their destination. Hawthorne overheard the driver tell David, who was sitting in the passenger seat up front, that the name Tebek comes from the Mayan language meaning the place of oak trees. The driver seemed to know a lot about the place as he was giving David a lot of information. Hawthorne could pick up most of it in Spanish, and what he didn't understand, Miranda would translate for him. The driver explained that Tebek was a small, poor town that had less than 500 people still living there. Some of the residents produced eggs and honey, which they took to Merida to sell in the markets and supermarkets. The quality of the eggs and honey were well known in the area. Tourists would sometimes venture out that way and visit the old estate of Hacienda Tebek. This estate or plantation included a larger 2-level sprawling structure, an old church, and several other older plantation outbuildings. As Hawthorne was listening, he thought to himself, searching for the mask might take longer than what we had expected.
With about 10 minutes to go before reaching the town of Tebek, they exited Route 180, southwest of Merida, and got onto an old, rough, and bumpy road. Great, Miranda said quietly. I hope we don't get carsick on this road.
David heard her say this and then responded, "You and me both." He then continued, "I know nothing about this place. I assume we can get onto the property of the hacienda." David said this as sort of a question and statement at the same time, hoping the driver would know. The sun had already started to go down and it was dusk. The evening's light would be dimming soon, and David knew they would be searching much of the sprawling area in the dark, which wasn't ideal. However, timing was everything right now.
As the car was bouncing closer and closer to the front gate of the Hacienda estate in Tebek, the headlights of the taxi illuminated the front gate to the sprawling estate. The gate was wide open and the grass was overgrown, well, in the places that there was still grass. Most of the open area was either dirt or weeds. The estate did not live up to its name, and there only seemed to be 2 or 3 oak trees still standing on the property, or at least that's what they could see from the car. Hawthorne overheard the taxi driver say something about the plantation and that it was not really a priority of the townspeople to keep up with the maintenance of the grounds or buildings anymore. The taxi came to a stop right outside the front gate, and the driver asked if he should wait for them. David responded with a yes and then said something about him and his friends not being there that long. So the taxi driver positioned the car facing back out the way they came in, so when the 3 of them, Hawthorne, David, and Miranda, came back, they could then leave immediately without having to turn around. Hawthorne noticed the driver do this after they had gotten out of the car and thought to himself, I like the way this guy thinks. He positions himself as ready. There was still enough light outside for the 3 of them to walk through the property without having to use their phone lights yet.
As the 3 of them were walking towards the first building, which was on the left side of the property, Miranda asked Professor Hawthorne, "What did you tell Prof. Tommy before we left?"
Hawthorne replied, "Well, to be honest with you, nothing." He then continues, "He's an early-to-bed kind of guy, and well, I didn't want to bother him as he went right to his room when we got back to the hotel and told all of us good night as he got in the elevator. Also, I think we can be in and out of here in less than 30 minutes. What I could tell from the internet is that most of the outbuildings don't provide enough cover and are in very poor condition to want to hide something as valuable as the mask. So if I was to guess, we should look closely at the old church and then the large main 2-story hacienda building."
David answered back as they were approaching the front door of the old church and said, "Those were my thoughts exactly. We can rule out this church building first, search it quickly, and then spend most of our time in the main building across the way."
Miranda immediately walked up to the front church building doors as David was still talking and yanked on them to open them, and nothing. They were locked up tight, would not even budge. Miranda then said, "Maybe there's a back entrance that's open." She then proceeded to walk around the side of the old building towards the back as David and Hawthorne were following and talking to each other. Miranda was fine to take the lead. She actually liked it. In a very male-dominated culture, she often liked to bend the cultural norms in this way. Most people her age and younger didn't have a problem with gender roles changing, but the older generation sure did. As she rounded the corner of the back of the church building, she had gotten lost in a few of her own thoughts about how her desire to lead and be in charge often got her in trouble. She was also thankful this aspect of her did not bother David one bit. He had actually told her that that was one of the things that he appreciated about her. Miranda stopped for a moment, woke up from her daydream, and then grabbed the old wood latch on the back door of the church, and nothing. It was locked as well.
David walked up to the side of Miranda with his phone light on and pointed on the latch and door threshold to see if any of the dirt and dust had been disturbed. He then said, "I don't think this door has been open for some time. The front doors were the same way. The dirt and dust had not been disturbed. Let's not waste any more time here and head straight over to the main hacienda building."
Hawthorne replies, "Yeah, probably a good assessment. Maybe once we gain entry to the other building, we can divide and conquer, since the building has multiple rooms on both the first and second floors." As the team walks across the flat and open middle dirt area of the estate, they notice that there are multiple car tracks in the dirt. They don't think much about it, but it does indicate that people had been there recently. They reach the other larger building structure, which has 2 levels and looks like an old-style hacienda or long plantation house. The building footprint is a U shape. Two wings of the hacienda flank the center section and create a courtyard area, which at some point in the time had a beautiful outdoor stone water feature and small pool. Much of the stone water feature structure was still there, but there was no water, only weeds and dirt. The building's ground floor had a long outdoor patio which ran the length of each of the sections. The patio had numerous arches which fit the classic Mexican plantation architectural style from its time period. As the three of them entered into the courtyard, the daylight was almost gone by now. Hawthorne suggested that he go up and search the second level of the building, while Miranda and David searched the ground level. Then, if either of them found something, a clue or the actual golden mask itself, they were to meet back down in the courtyard and then head back to the waiting taxi car. They agreed and split ways, now armed with their phone lights and the determination to get in and get out as quickly as possible.
David and Miranda stuck together and walked through the main arch area into the center building, first looking down the long porch area. The outdoor porch area was in poor condition. Broken old wood furniture and dirt covered sections of the concrete floor. Nothing to see there. So the two tried the front main door and, to their surprise, it was unlocked. David opened the door and he and Miranda then stepped inside.
Miranda looked at David and then said, "Let's start in the central building first, then we can move to the side areas after that. Maybe they were lazy and stashed the mask here."
"If we could only be so fortunate," David replied. Then he said, "By the way, what do you do with the jade jar?"
As Miranda and David start searching the numerous empty rooms in the main center building on the ground floor, Miranda tells David what she did with the jade jar. She says, "When we were back at Chichen Itza and before we got on the bus today, I put the old gym bag which had the jade jar in it into another bag and then asked Ava to put it in my hotel room when you and I got off at the bus depot today. Out of all the people in our group, I trust Ava the most."
"That makes sense," David replies. He then says, "All right, we should look in the side wings and the rooms there now. These rooms are completely empty." By this time, it was dark outside, only some light from the half moon. Inside the hacienda, it was quite dark, so David and Miranda were using their phone lights to search each room. As David and Miranda searched the third room, right wing, David then says, "I wonder if the professor is having any better luck than us."
Hawthorne was having the same results as David and Miranda. Each room he searched was practically empty, besides the occasional broken piece of furniture and graffiti on the wall. Professor Hawthorne was moving quicker than David and Miranda. He was already searching the final wing on the second level, which is right above where David and Miranda were searching, down below him on the ground level. After another few minutes, Hawthorne had canvassed the entire second level and was empty-handed. There was virtually nothing in the old building on the second level. The taxi driver was right. The professor thought to himself, the local townspeople have really neglected this old historical site. Hawthorne came to the end of the second wing and found a flight of stairs that led back down to the ground floor. He knew that these stairs would take him back down to the ground floor, in which he could then exit the hacienda and go back out into the courtyard and wait for David and Miranda. So he took the stairs down to the ground floor, turned the corner, and ran right into David and Miranda, who were just about to enter the last room on the ground floor in that wing.
Miranda got startled as she walked towards the last room and then almost ran into Professor Hawthorne as he turned the corner coming out of the stairwell. Hawthorne was standing right in front of Miranda with his face all lit up by Miranda's phone light. Miranda jumps and says, "Whoa, Professor, you startled me. Sorry about that. Any luck on the second floor?"
"No, nothing," the professor responds. He then asks, "What about you guys?"
David replies as he walks through the middle of Hawthorne and Miranda and into the final room in this part of the hacienda. He says, "Let me check this final room and then we can all check the other wing on the ground level." David walks into the room and quickly scans the room with his phone light, pointing it at each wall and around the floor. "Bingo," David says. David looks down and sees a clearly outlined square section of the old wooden floor. He could tell it had been moved and put back recently because the dirt and dust on the floor had been disturbed. It did not have a handle and was set flush with the level of other floorboards. David reaches into his pocket to pull out his always goes with me pocket knife, and then remembers that he had to leave it back in Mexico City because they flew by commercial airplane to Merida instead of driving. By that time, Hawthorne and Miranda were standing over the same section of the floor looking down.
"Yep," Miranda says. "That looks like a trapdoor."
"And it looks like it's been used recently," Hawthorne adds.
And David then says, "We need to find something to pry it open. Help me look around here somewhere." The three of them then walk around the larger corner room looking for anything they could use to pry open the square wooden floor section to see what was inside.
As Miranda is walking slowly with her phone light over by the back wall of the room, she then says, guys, what are the odds of us finding an old crowbar?
Hawthorne was the first to respond. Well, I'd have to say about 0, but by the sound of your voice, I'm guessing that is exactly what you found over there.
Miranda turns around and faces both David and Hawthorne with an old crowbar in her hands and says, I think these artifacts really want to be returned to their rightful place, and something or someone is helping us.
David then says, "What? Where did you find that?"
Miranda replies, it was just laying over there in the back corner of the room next to this old wooden chair. Miranda walks over to David, who's now standing over what looks like a trapdoor in the floor, and hands him the crowbar. All three of them watch as David pries the old wooden square section of the floor up with the crowbar. Miranda, along with Hawthorne, hold their phone lights over David as he works to get the floor section up and then moves it out of the way. The hole in the floor is just large enough to fit a small person into it. Miranda knows it's got to be her since both Hawthorne and David are much broader than her. She says, watch out guys, let me shine the light into the hole. It's not very deep, maybe 4 feet, maybe less. But it does extend outward. I think it's a crawl space under this room. Miranda, without hesitation, then drops herself down straight into the crawl space and says, I'll be right back.
David, along with Hawthorne, just stand there, hovering above the now open trapdoor entrance. They are both just looking down into the hole in the floor with their phone lights on, hoping Miranda doesn't run into any snakes or rodents. All of a sudden, they hear a dragging sound and see Miranda's face look directly up toward both David and Professor Hawthorne.
Miranda then says, Here, help me with this. It's heavy. She then lifts up one side of a larger black bag towards David and Hawthorne, who grab it and hoist it up and out of the hole in the floor. Miranda then grabs David's hand as he helps her get back out of the crawl space. Miranda brushes off her clothes from the dirt and cobwebs and then says with a smile, Well, Professor, what's in the bag?
When David was helping Miranda back out of the small crawl space, Hawthorne unzipped the bag and pulled open the sides to reveal an object wrapped in a large beach towel. Of all things, a beach towel that said, Welcome to Cancun. As David and Miranda watched, Hawthorne carefully pulled the beach towel sides off the object, and behold, the golden mask of Chichen Itza stared right back at them, gleaming in the phone lights, almost glowing. All three of them stood there quietly just for a moment and looked at it. Hawthorne broke the silence and said, That sure is a magnificent piece of history. I think it's time we get out of here.
David then said, My thoughts exactly. It sure looks a lot better now than where I found it in the pyramid. The museum did a great job cleaning and polishing it.
Yeah, it's almost mesmerizing in a way. The mask seems to communicate to you when you are looking at it. I've never seen anything like it and up close like this.
David reached down, wrapped the beach towel back around the mask, and then zipped up the black bag and said, I'll carry this out. Let's hope the taxi is still out there waiting for us.
Hawthorne opened the side door, which led out to the courtyard. They stopped for a moment to get their bearings as the place was completely dark now. Hawthorne then said, The old church is up ahead on the right, so we'll need to walk back across the open dirt and weedy area toward the front gate where we entered. The front gate area is maybe a good 60 yards away in front of us. The professor started walking with Miranda and David behind him. Hawthorne knew the bag had to be heavy as he heard Miranda and David talking about it behind him. He also heard them making a plan to return the mask to El Castillo, the pyramid, at first light, before the main grounds of Chichen Itza opened to the tourists for that day. Hawthorne knew, as David did and Miranda did, that the quicker they could return the mask to its rightful place, the better. As the three approached the front gate, they saw that the taxi was still there, parked in the same location. The driver was sitting up front in the driver's seat, sound asleep. Hawthorne opened the front passenger door, which awoke the driver. He sat straight up and then asked if it was time to go back to Merida.
Miranda and David got in the back seat and put the large, heavy black bag between them on the seat. They were determined not to let it out of their sight now that they had recovered it. Miranda could not believe that they had recovered both artifacts on the same day. As the taxi driver turned on the car, Miranda looked at David and said, The legends have to be true.
David replies softly so as not to allow the driver to hear and says, Well, we're only half done with our mission.
As David and Miranda were talking, Hawthorne and the driver, looking out the front windshield, noticed headlights moving toward them on the same bumpy dirt road they had come in on about 30 minutes earlier. Hawthorne knew this wasn't a normal thing, especially this late at night, past dark. Hacienda Tebek was not a tourist hotspot. Plus, the small town of Tebek seemed to close up and shut down every night around dusk. It wasn't really a happening place. So this could possibly mean one of two things. Either this was David's brother coming to retrieve the mask, or it was the cartel. Either way, it would be good to avoid either one. Hawthorne reached over and stopped the taxi driver from turning on his headlights. Hawthorne was thankful the taxi car was an older vehicle. the kind where you had to manually turn on the headlights instead of them automatically turning on.
By this time, David and Miranda had noticed as well. David, having the same thoughts as the professor, asked the taxi driver in Spanish to move his car out of sight.
Miranda could hear the urgency in David's request and then added, "Please hurry." The taxi driver, without hesitation, pulled the car forward a bit, put it in reverse, and then backed up into some tall weeds off the side of the gate, making sure the front of the car was hidden from view. The weeds were tall enough to conceal most of the car. The darkness helped, so with their luck, this other car coming down the road would drive right by them as they entered into the hacienda property.
As the car got closer, they couldn't see very well because of the tall weeds and brush, but they could hear it getting closer and closer. Hawthorne and the others could also see through the weeds that the headlights of the car were now shining brighter and brighter on the front gate area, which was a mere 25 yards away from where they were parked. Hawthorne looked over at the driver, who was just sitting there in silence, looking straight ahead with a concerned look on his face. Hawthorne noticed the man pull the sun visor down, look at a photo, probably of his family, and then make a cross gesture, forehead to chest, then shoulder to shoulder. Hawthorne knew the guy was a bit nervous. They waited there for what seemed like forever. Then finally a truck, which they had thought was a car, drove by at a high rate of speed through the main gate and toward the courtyard of the hacienda.
As soon as the pickup truck had passed, David said to the driver, "Vamos, vamos." The driver knew enough not to draw attention to themselves leaving, so he kept the headlights off and slowly drove the car forward, out onto the dirt road. He pushed gently on the gas pedal, hoping the sound of the engine would be very soft. David reminded the driver not to touch the brakes either, as doing so would light up the back of the car's brake lights, which would surely be seen by the other vehicle, which was now parked in the hacienda's courtyard. Lights on and music blaring.
Both Miranda and David were faced in towards each other and were looking out the back window at the truck now parked at the hacienda. The taxi they were in was slowly moving, and that's the way they needed to be moving until they made it back out to the highway. Miranda knew if they could go undetected, then they would be in the clear. As the taxi got further and further away from the hacienda's property, the truck got smaller and smaller. Miranda and David noticed that 4 or 5 guys had gotten out of the truck, and 2 of them had what looked like assault weapons, long guns.
David nudged Miranda and said quietly, "That's not my brother. Those are cartel members, and they are going to be mad as soon as they find their little treasure is gone." All of a sudden, they hear a faint rat-a-tat-tat, tat-tat-tat echo into the night. David squints and looks toward the hacienda property again, which is further away now. He notices what seems like one of the guys pointing his gun into the sky and squeezing off rounds into the sky.
Hawthorne, the driver, and Miranda all hear the gunshots echoing off in the distance. Hawthorne turns in his seat and looks out the back of the car where they had just come from and asks, "What do you think? Are they shooting into the air because they're mad their treasure is gone, or are they signaling to more of their cronies?"
Neither David nor Miranda knew the answer to Hawthorne's question. So, they just sat there in silence, looking out the back window of the car into the dark, making sure there was no one following them. However, David overheard the driver tell Hawthorne that the cartel members are signaling other potential cartel members in this area by firing their guns into the air using a certain trigger pattern.
Miranda looked down at her phone GPS and said, "Another 5 minutes on this old road, and then we'll be back on main route 180 heading back to Merida." Another burst of gunfire could be heard from a distance behind them, along with tracer bullets streaming straight up into the air like bottle rockets in the night. Wow, Miranda thought to herself nervously. Just another 5 minutes and we'll be back on the main highway and headed towards safety.
And that ends part 9. Stay tuned for next week as we bring you part 10, the final chapter of Legends of the Yucatán. And that brings us to the end of another inspiring episode. Huge thanks to Mr. Mike for breaking down the power and purpose of capstone projects, and to the seniors who shared their incredible journeys with us. Stay tuned for our next episode, which will be our Season 3 finale and our final chapter in our ongoing adventure story, Legends of the Yucatán. And as always, this podcast would not be possible without the hard work and support of our international student production team.
All music and sound effects are courtesy of Pixabay.com, a vibrant community of creatives, sharing copyright-free images, videos, and music.
And we are signing off until next time. We are Students Incorporated. because your voice matters.